All right, thanks for joining everyone. Let's go ahead and get started with the Lido node operator community call number 3. We're going to start with a really quick overview of our agenda for today. Okay, so it's pretty packed call. We're probably going to go a little bit over an hour, so strap into your seats and get ready for the long haul. If you can't make it for the whole call, this will of course be recorded and made available later, together with the presentations. We're going to kick off today's call with an update on Lido on Polygon regarding the upgrade to version 2 and the upcoming wave of onboarding, where we're going to do basically the first set of onboarding following the genesis of the Lido on Polygon upgrade protocol. Then we're going to do a technical deep dive on the upcoming withdrawals functionality for Lido that will be rolled out in tandem with the Shanghai/Capella, or Chapella as it's being called, hard fork on Ethereum, followed up by 2 guest appearances, one by Rated and one by Nethermind, who will both tell us a little bit about the work that they've been doing around validators, analytics, MEV, and all of that cool stuff. So first off, we're going to have Jakob from Shard Labs, who's going to tell us about Lido on Polygon V2 and the upgrade.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Izzy, for the introduction. First of all, just to double check, can everybody see my screen, my presentation? All right, perfect. So, Lido on Polygon version 2. I think most of you are probably aware that Lido on Polygon has been live for quite some time. We launched the version 1 last year in April, and thankfully the version 1 is working very well. No exploits. We didn't end up on the rec.news or anything bad. But some things could still be improved, and that's why I want to introduce Lido on Polygon version 2, which is now ready to be upgraded. So today we're going to go through the changelog, and I'm going to announce the node operator onboarding wave 2. All right, so this is me. This is my Telegram and Twitter handle, Tradiako. If you have any additional questions after this presentation, or in general, if you want to just expand your network, let's stay in touch and you can reach out here. So let's talk Lido on Polygon version 2. This picture, I think, represents the difference between Lido on Polygon version 2 in comparison with Lido on Polygon version 1. So most of you who play games probably play some games on PlayStation 2, and the first version was very nice, big upgrade from the PlayStation 1, but it was thick. And then they released the second version, which was a slim version. And this is basically what happened with Lido on Polygon version 2. Most of the upgrades, most of the weight loss actually happened on the node operator parts. To be honest, some things were unnecessarily complicated. We could even say a bit over-engineered in the version 1. And the protocol was, let's say, less flexible. So in version 2, we have reduced the friction for node operators, both in terms of onboarding and the operations, like changing signer keys, withdrawing rewards, and stuff like that.
Recording in progress.
Also, by doing that, we have improved decentralization. We will see how, but the main points are actually that it's not required anymore to migrate the ownership to Lido contracts of your validator, and we did some tweaks to balancing out of users' delegations in the system. So this is basically the changelog, the summary of the changelog. Rebalancing stake among validators on both deposits and withdrawals. This is very new. We have developed some algorithms which we introduced into Estimatic contract, which are actively rebalancing stake, both on deposits and withdrawals. Previously, or actually currently, this was done manually. And in one of the next slides where we'll see distribution, I will explain what actually was the issue. and what is improved now. In general, the whole logic for node operators is simplified by a lot. The biggest change is actually that there is no need to transfer validator ownership to Lido smart contracts, which was actually required in the version 1. To explain in a bit more details, what does this mean? Basically, in Polygon, your validator slot is represented by the staking NFT. It's ERC-721 contract. Whoever has it has permissions like changing commission fee, rotating signers, unstaking, and stuff like that. It was a requirement to transfer it to one of the Lido contracts in the version 1. And now the slimmed down version of the node operator registry is basically just a whitelist of this staking NFT IDs. So once the node operator is onboarded to Lido on Polygon, basically we just input the ID of that validator, and future delegations just start coming to that validator. And other changes are basically general changes that we saw as a great way to introduce while we are reworking the contracts. We added final role-based access control, of course, gas optimizations, basically for everything. So both for users on delegations and withdrawals, and for node operator controls. So optimizations for all the parties that are using Lido on Polygon. And of course, like with every software, once you get the chance, you resolve some issues that were sticking in your eyes for a long time. So we did a lot of code refactoring, which is important not just for readability and audits, but also for the maintenance. In case we want to introduce some new features, or in case something needs to be tweaked or fixed, it's always easier to work on nicely written code. So here is the upgrade plan. Some steps are already done. So of course, protocol development and the audit has been done. All the contracts that are on production are always audited. So this is mandatory. Deployment and smart contract verification on Etherscan is done. This was a requirement for the snapshot proposal that also passed. So how the upgrade process will actually look? I need to point out that this is an actual upgrade. So we are not releasing a new protocol, like for example, Uniswap V3. So for users, for STmatic holders, they don't need to do anything, basically, because we are just upgrading the implementations of the contract. So for users, it will be completely seamless. Even though it's seamless, we will still need to pause the Lido on Polygon protocol for some time. It will be like a couple of hours, so it's nothing huge. While the contracts are paused, new implementations will be basically introduced to proxy contracts. All the configurations will be set up to the existing values, like fees and configs. And then after that, Lido on Polygon will be unpaused, so everybody can just continue staking, unstaking, and receiving rewards. And the last part of the upgrade process, which is not an actual part of the upgrade process, but it's something that it's possible to do, will be possible to do, that is the validator slots migration. Existing node operators, 6 of them, were onboarded in the version 1, of course, which means they had to transfer the ownership to Lido on Polygon contracts. After the upgrade is finished, they will be able to freely get back their staking NFTs into their wallets, like Gnosis safes or externally held accounts, and they will function completely the same as all the future node operators that will be onboarded. So I already mentioned this slide. This is from our Dune Analytics dashboard. This is the current stake distribution among 6 node operators that Lido on Polygon currently has. It's actually not bad considering the mechanism that is currently used, which is a manual mechanism. The initial setup was that Lido on Polygon launched just with Shardlabs validator, meaning only one. for security reasons and to speed up go-to-market. So that means that after additional 5 node operators were onboarded, ShardLabs had 100% of stake and other node operators had 0. Since there was no rebalancing mechanism, what was done, basically a ShardLabs validator was kept to 0. 0 delegations were allowed to go to ShardLabs validator, and all the delegations were distributed among other node operators. Once the situation evened out, the cap from ShardLabs validator was removed, and they kept growing more or less equally. Another thing that is fixed or improved in the version 2 is that we are doing now rebalancing also on undelegations. Previously, on large undelegations, the whole amount would be pulled out of one node operator, which would basically ruin the balance of the system very easily. Now that is not possible. That's not an issue because we are taking care of that on undelegations. And finally, after the upgrade is done, I want to announce that we'll be having a node operator onboarding Wave 2. Still no exact dates, but you should follow the latest new Lido socials. We are targeting to open the applications from next week. What are the requirements? Basic requirements for node operators? Of course, performance. That goes without saying, but also now Polygon is kind of helping keep this performance across the whole validator set in line after the Polygon improvement proposal number 4, which introduce benchmarking, grace periods for operators that are not performing the best, and ultimately, if the performance does not improve after 2 grace periods, the validator is forcefully unstaked. This is also a change. Commission fee was required to be exactly 5% on the initial onboarding. Now it's more flexible. If for any reason you want to have commission fee set to less than 5%, either because you have agreement with your client or for any other reason, you're free to do so. It just has to be less or equal to 5%. And of course, ability to provide as much details as possible about the way how you run your infrastructure, how you run the validators, redundancy, recovery strategy, and all the stuff that is important to keep the performance top-notch. That being said, this is just an overview, basic requirements. If you're interested in applying to become a node operator, please feel free to reach out for any additional questions. We're always happy to hop on a meeting, go through all the details, what are the requirements, what is in for you, and how the process works. That's been it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jakub. I'm just gonna leave a few minutes for possible questions, either from the audience or from other people on the call. In the meantime, I'm going to try to summarize that great presentation in a tweet or less, and let me know how that goes. So for V2 overall, there's going to be UX improvements, but mostly from the operational perspective in terms of adding and removing operators, but also in terms of allocating stake more equitably across our operator set. So stake will be better distributed both during staking events and on delegation events. There's going to be an emphasis on performance in line with the new Polygon improvement proposal. And of course, operators will get the full control of their validator slots back, which is important, obviously, not only for security and ensuring proper flow of their operations, but also so that they can vote on future governance proposals that it seems like there will be more of in the Polygon ecosystem.
Exactly. I forgot to say that. Thank you for adding it. Yeah, currently, Lido and Polygon validators were not able to vote in the Polygon governance because the smart contract had an ownership of the staking NFT. now that will be basically fixed and they will be able to contribute to the governance.
Awesome. There's a comment from the chat that we can't tell who was talking. So the ghoul avatar there is Yakov from Shard Labs. There's a question in the Zoom chat. Will Wave 2 onboarding be open to validators who are currently not in the Polygon validator set? So unfortunately, currently Lido does not have Polygon slots. And due to basically the new Polygon improvement proposals, it looks like Polygon has a mechanism more or less for how validators will be rotated in or out. So barring the potential where net new validators are added to Polygon in terms of increasing the total limit of slots, this onboarding will only be open to operators that currently have a Polygon validator.
There's another question in the YouTube chat. Jakov, have you guys noticed any notable improvements in the chain after Polygon's recent hard fork upgrade?
Yes, actually, to be honest, like initially there were some issues with the upgrade across the whole validator set, so not just Lido node operators. But looking at the metrics, the amount of reorgs that are happening is less, and also the amount of blocks in the reorgs is basically shorter. Like the reorg chain is shorter now. So definitely there are improvements.
I also see another question in the YouTube chat. What are the requirements for becoming a validator? So for the Wave 2 onboarding, in order to apply and potentially be accepted, you need to be a current validator on Polygon. You need to have a commission between 0 to 5%. You need to be performant, so basically not within any of the grace period bands at the end of the application period, and you should be able to provide certain details about the company, the staking organization, or yourself if you're an individual, and the infrastructure that you run, because there's certain kinds of like not necessarily requirements, but principles and objectives that we try to execute as Lido. That's based on our operator set strategy, which you can find on our forums. And so we try to take those into account when we're doing onboarding rounds. For other chains, you can definitely check the operator portal. So operatorportal.lido.fi. There is a subsection for each of the networks that Lido has a presence on that discusses the requirements for potentially receiving stake from Lido. Some of the networks are curated or permissioned, which means that there's an application process. And other networks, like for example, Polkadot and Kusama, are based on an off-chain stake delegation algorithm. So in those cases, all you need to do is actually just run a validator on those networks. Okay, any more questions about Lido on Polygon or for Yakov? It looks like no. If you do have any questions, feel free to email nom@lido.fi or reach out via the Lido node operator portal, or of course our Discord. Next up, we have Eugene, who's a contributor within Lido in the protocol team, that will present a deep dive on the upcoming withdrawals functionality for the Lido and Ethereum protocol.
Thank you. Can you see my screen? Yeah, thank you. And I share a link to the slides, and also I share a link to research post where I shared like a document which I want to introduce in the presentation. Yeah, my name is Eugene. I'm part of Lido and Ethereum protocol team. And I want to share like some context with you that protocol team has been working for several months. It's a think about withdrawals and how we think withdrawals should look like in Lido and Ethereum. Like first of all, little bit context. Like the gist of stakers should be able to withdraw. Yeah. And I guess it's like really most anticipated feature in Lido and Ethereum protocol, and Chapelle upgrade will bring this feature, like will be possible to make it real. And we expect that hard fork Chapelle would take place like something between March and April. And since hard fork would allow to eject and I can stake effort that staked staked validators and eject validators and get effort on execution layer. Lido protocol should follow this upgrade and provide an ability to withdraw money to their stakers. And design this feature is not so easy as it seems from first sight. First of all, due to asynchronous, like the communication between consensus layer and execution layers is asynchronous. And the second, async nature of flashing mechanics and validator exit. Development team of Lido and Ethereum put together a post that you can you can actually use QR code and check it out, or you can go to research forum and check out like the first topic, because I just published it right before my presentation. Yeah, and I would be really interested in feedback on this post because yeah, it is like it's a lot of not trivial assumption in that post. So we would be happy that someone also would go through all this logic and check that we did, that we proposed right decision here. Currently, Lido protocol only allows user to stake effort and gets staked effort token in return. And what's like, I need to say that this presentation is mostly focused on user flow, and it's some things that should happen in the background, like validator rejection order and all the stuff. It's just out of context for now, but it's probably like, let's discuss it in research forum if you have some input here. But yeah, right now I would focus on user flow. And like the gist of it, that we propose to have like another smart contract withdrawal. It's called withdrawal queue, that allow user to withdraw, to put withdrawal request and claim like their effort. The process would be two-phase, synchronous. So all withdrawals requests would go to withdrawal queue. The first step for user is request. Staff holder sends request to Lido queue contract, logs staff there. After that, the protocol would work on this request and fulfill requested in a batch way. So just once protocol have enough effort to fill that request, it sends corresponding amount of effort, burn corresponding amount of staff logged, and finalize next batch of requests. And after that, user can claim their request at any time, and amount of effort that allocated to the request cannot be changed in the future. So yeah, let's take a look at the picture, because it's easier to understand the process by pictures. So first step, it's very easy. User just sends their stuff to the queue, and yeah, like minor detail that like we propose to put some maximum amount, like maximum cap for each request. Like the main reason here is we want to keep the code of smart contracts as simple as possible and not allow partial fulfillment. And like if we have this assumption, we need to put maximum request to not allow like queue doesn't get clogged by a single request, and like it's like user can send several withdrawal requests and effectively bypass this constraint. So it's really technical constraint, not the real one. The second step from user perspective is like that. When a request will be finalized, it's green squares here, yeah. And as you can see in these green squares, it's effort, not taking effort, because it's just finalized request. It's already like the stuff that was left here, it's already burned. And we designed this withdrawal queue contract having in mind UX and because we're going to build also UI that allow users to unstake. Like we have like 3 items that allow to build smoother experience. Like since withdrawal request, it's a separate smart contracts to allow interaction with user tokens, it needs to be like some allowance mechanics, yeah. So to make it simple and make it in one transaction, we're going to add permit mechanics to step and allow to send withdrawal requests in one transaction. Number 2, it's in withdrawal queue, we're also going to we also propose to have like handle for send drop step to the withdrawal queue and make all wrapping and wrapping mechanics under the hood. And number 3, since we have like maximum amount of for each maximum amount of steps for each withdrawal request, we have like handle to we have a way to handle withdrawal requests in a batch. There are 2 non-obvious, like additional non-obvious like design decision that we propose. That first, like number 1 is withdrawal request can be cancelled because otherwise it's an attack vector that allow attacker to grief a protocol and just put withdrawal request, wait until Lido like signal for injection of some validators, finally ejected, and after that attacker can cancel the request, and Lido would force to restake this again. And by looping this process, like attacker can actually force a Lido validator to spend time in the activation queue and effectively lowering the APR. Because like Steph is a token that once you stake your effort and get staked effort in return, you get rewards from Frost Oracle reports. And the second that actually requires that spend time in withdrawal queue wouldn't have rewards. It's also because of attack vector, because otherwise one can always keep their effort in the queue, just put in the queue, having rewards, waiting until it withdraws and redeposits, and loop by loop in this process. It's also like an attack vector that we want to prevent. Yeah, and let's talk about fulfillment phase. So we already talked about rules, how withdrawal queue should work like, and like important design decision that we also want to propose, that request finalization can be only on an Oracle report. So because Lido on Ethereum protocol lives in between 2 chains, like precise rate between like F and Steph can be known only in the moment of Oracle reports. That's why we propose to do it like that. On this picture, you can see that Oracle finalized 2 requests and they become green, and Steph just burned, and it's the request fulfilled with F. Yeah, this is the like Oracle mechanics, and Another questions that's also very important, it's what funds should be used to fulfill withdrawal request. We propose to use all funds that that we have. Because, I mean, like users right now, like when users deposit their F, they go to like deposit buffer. And on this upgrade, we propose to extend like Lido buffer with like Lido buffer is a place when all inflows come, like user deposits, like partial withdrawals, execution layer rewards like MEV and like priority fees go to the Lido buffer. And on an Oracle report, Oracle decides like how these funds should be used. Like, first of all, they should be spent on withdrawals to fulfill like pending requests. And like the rest effort should be restaking. Yeah. And in case of some big withdrawal requests that cannot be filled, for example, protocol don't have enough funds to fulfill it in one shot, like Oracle can decide just keep this in buffer until next report. And yeah, I guess that we cover like the basic mechanics of withdrawal queue. But what's missing here, as I said, the session is the most complicating part of the like all this logic. And before talking about how protocols should handle slashing, I want to show you how Ethereum works with slashing. Like the gist of it that slashing are at least 36 days long, and like losses unpredictable, because for slashing actually have like 3 types of penalty: minimum penalty, midterm attack multiplying penalty, and attestation penalty. And midterm multiplier penalty depends on network condition and all session conditions that happens around this event, and can be like very big. I mean, like can be like if like a really catastrophic scenario, it can just eat all like validator balance. Also, missed attestation penalties also cannot be predicted because, for example, the network can go in a leak mode. So it's really like just a read that in the time of slashing events, it's impossible to predict the amount of losses. And so how we propose to handle slashing? The gist of it is that in case of minor slashing, we propose to do nothing. And because basically losing of several validators altogether, it would be covered by staking rewards in the current network conditions. And in case of mass slashing, we like proposing special mode, bunker mode. So in case of mass slashing, Lido protocol enters bunker mode, and like it stops processing withdrawal requests that made near the like mass slashing events actually trigger this bunker mode, and it lasts until slashing effects are socialized. Like bunker mode mechanics is really so like in our post withdrawal landscape, we spent a lot of time to really build a bunker mode mechanics. And for like just like brief introduction to bunker mode, and you can check it out, checking out research post. But the main idea is that the protocol Lido on Ethereum works most of the time in the turbo mode. You can remember that old PT that like all the time work in turbo mode. So the main idea is that Lido protocol should work that PCs. And in case of mass slashing, protocols go in a bunker mode until slashing effect will be socialized back to the turbo mode, and everything will continue as usual. Bunker mode is very unlikely So under current known history, Lido the bunker mode shouldn't be triggered. Yeah, and for details you can check out posts once again, because it's very hard to give all necessary details in like 20 minutes presentation. Last things I probably want to share with you, it's not really related to design decisions, but it's about scheming, and it's about withdrawal credential notation ceremony, because like we have 13% of validators that points to withdrawal credentials 0x000. That's baked by distributed custody in the on a Lido launch, and we're going to rotate these validators to withdrawal credentials that points to smart contract 1. And once we perform this operation, these validators would be also schemable as another validators. And in the first week after the hard fork, we expect that a lot of 200,000 effort would be pushed to execution layer, and it would be really a good portion to fulfill first withdrawal request, because we expect that some long stakers want to unstake in the first days, because they probably won't do it through secondary market. And yeah, so we expect this amount of effort to meet our first amount of withdrawals. I guess that's it. Oh no, sorry. Yeah, that's it. And thank you. And once again, I would be really happy if you provide some feedback about the way how we propose to deal with withdrawals. Thank you.
Thanks, Eugene. It's pretty simple. I think we all get it. We can move on, right? Withdrawals done and dusted. I think at this point we can see who has any questions. I'm sure there's quite a few. I'll kick things off, but of course, anybody who's on the call also free to ask questions via voice. If we can go to the previous slide, the one that's showing the initial gush. So it seems that in less than 2 weeks, we anticipate that A will be able to rotate all OX00 withdrawal credentials or BLS only withdrawal credentials to OX01 withdrawal credentials, and do a full cycle of skimming. And we anticipate that this will lead to around 200,000 ETH moving to the execution layer that will be able to be used for either for like an initial withdrawals request, however sizable that may be, but then also potentially like the skimming obviously is going to happen cyclically. So how much ETH do we anticipate from skimmed rewards that it's going to be used like after the initial like thrust of withdrawals to make available in the buffer to use for withdrawal fulfillment?
I mean, like how much demand we expect besides this, like 200,000 or?
No, so the initial 200,000 is like a mix of all of the rewards that have accumulated so far, right? So after this initial 200K, where I mean, it's hard to know exactly how much of it may be used for initial withdrawals. There will always be like every cycle a certain amount of skimmed rewards that end up in the EL, right?
Yeah. Just you can estimate it easily by like right now the protocol have like daily like 500 effort, something like that, and you can just subtract from this like execution layer rewards from this and get like skimmed rewards that we get daily, something like that. It would be like skimming would go very fast, so I guess it would be like something like equal to the amount of actually consensus layer rewards that we get right now, because skimming would go through all validators very fast.
Okay. I see that there's also another call on Zoom. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi there. Thanks for that. Really good presentation, really detailed article, loads of information there. I just wanted to ask, how fixed is this? Is in terms of like set in stone with the examples that you've got around the buffer queue and things like bunker mode, and what is the scope to change as reality sets in and withdrawals actually start to happen? What's the plan if things need to be adjusted slightly?
Like the bunker mode, it's adjustable things. So our idea to like have like smart contracts. I mean, like since Oracle orchestrate like a zero process, the bunker mode would be defined in oracles, and we can adjust it like based on, I don't know, some historical data. So we can just launch some bunker mode, yeah, for example, like conservative, yeah. And after that, take a look on this and like make more precise research. And for example, decide like, for example, like right now we think that bunker mode will be defined like something like 500 validators in this, but it would be not that easy. It would depend on network condition, and this would be like kind of function that takes how much like LiDAR validators, non-LiDAR validators, how much ongoing session LiDAR, non-LiDAR validators, some like daily rewards, and based on this, Oracle can trigger bunker mode if Oracle can foresee that it would be negative rebased because of like ongoing session, something like that. And this might be changed in the future by like changing Oracle code. So is it answer your question or?
Yeah, no, that's great. Just to understand how dynamic it will be in real life, because plans made beforehand don't always work. So that's really good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Just a couple questions in the YouTube chat as well. Do Lido withdrawals plan to release roughly around the same time as Shanghai, or will there potentially be some lag in the ability to withdraw?
Yeah, it's very good questions. So we plan to release it before, but it really depends on like security audits that we going to launch soon. We would have like 3 security audits, and if it will be okay and no like showstoppers would be fine, yeah. So we were going to launch it like before the hard fork.
Great. And then there's another one. Does Lido predict Shanghai unlocking withdrawals to have a negative or positive impact on the overall staked ecosystem?
I think it's positive because actually, if you able to not only stake but withdraw, it's like increased trust to the protocol, because right now it's not really obvious. I mean, like it's not guaranteed by code that you can withdraw. It's only just promises by the DAO. So like if you have this in a code, it's actually better than just promises.
Okay. Last call for any questions around the withdrawals design that Eugene presented. Otherwise, we'll pick up the conversation on the forums. Okay. Next up, we have the 2020s version of the Candyman. In the 90s, if you were around then, it meant something very, very different. Elias Simos giving us an update on Rated.
All right. Can everybody hear me? I lost the chat for some reason, so I'm gonna assume that you can. What is up, everybody? I love the sound of turbo mode. We're not there yet at Rated, but goddamn, I hope that we get there soon. Thanks, Eugene, for a great presentation. Hello, everybody. I'm Elias. I'm the founder of Rated, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the work that we're doing, how some of that work has overlapped with Lido, and I'm going to let you know a little bit about our plans, things that we have in the pipe, and also cover some of the really nice features that we've released recently. So just some groundwork. What is Rated and why are we here really? Oops, that was premature. So maybe worth giving you a little bit of context about myself and how I came to do what I'm doing today. So I used to work for a company called Bison Trails in the infrastructure space. Then we were acquired by Coinbase, spent a bunch of time there as a protocol specialist. And basically throughout kind of my work, my main blocker in kind of operating really was the fact that I had no visibility into the infrastructure space. What's happening? How are we performing versus our competition? How's the network performing overall? Just getting any insight in terms of data out of the whole infrastructure strata was actually pretty hard and a lot harder than I would have liked. So I took it upon myself to kind of solve that problem for me, and kind of like driven by curiosity, I ended up here. And really what we're trying to do at Rated is to contextualize all that data that makes up the infrastructure space. It's a huge data pool. We thought that it was sort of going unloved. And we also thought that it really could do with more transparency, better context, and really like products that help sort of surface whatever is happening in that infrastructure layer. Because really, if we hope that this industry and blockchains run a meaningful amount of the world's commerce, anything close to 1%, and then beyond, commerce, transactions, finance, like you name it. I don't think we can articulate this value proposition if we don't have the tools to actually communicate what the things that we're building on are really good at. And so this is what we're here to do. And we've started kind of solving this problem and building towards that future with a network explorer, which basically articulates and contextualizes everything that happens around the Ethereum, in and around the Ethereum infrastructure set, with the validator and the validator operator as the index, rather than most block explorers that take the block as the index. And then we unwrap the problem from there. And then we're also supplementing that the network explorer is effectively kind of the first product that is powered out of the Rated API, which is kind of the developer's version of accessing that data. And what we hope to do is we hope to enable, like, level the playing field as much as we can in terms of data. We think that without data, we're flying blind. And we think that, we want to give as many people as possible kind of the ability to see where they can't. And we also want to communicate everything that's happening to the outside world. So we started out officially in April 2022. We've been operating in tinkering mode since about the end of 2021, but really like officially since the beginning of last year. And we have come a fairly long way until then. So from humble beginnings to humble present, but still like on an exciting trajectory. We got 7,000 plus viewers, users, monthly unique visitors on the Network Explorer. We've recently expanded the scope of things that we cover in the Network Explorer in terms of adding views that describe what's happening overall in the network, adding views in terms of describing what's happening more recently, contextualizing the relayer landscape, and very soon we're going to be launching screens on the builder landscape and enriching those screens increasingly more, but also sort of articulating the different strata of the different layers that make up Ethereum's infrastructure set, trying to separate sort of the capital allocation layer with the operation layer, and then adding different views that surface not operators and separate them explicitly from pools and such. So we're currently live on Prater and Ethereum mainnet. And then looking at the API, we've got about 25 entities that are integrated with the API, and they're avid users of it. We got 100 plus experimenters, tinker, and independent developers using our API. And as of more recently, more recent spike on data accuracy, which is something that we take really seriously upon, and we continuously strive to improve there. We found that we had in a bunch of different data fields that we report less than 0.01% tracking error with the actual source material, which is something that we hope to improve even more. So a little bit about kind of our relationship with Lido. Thus far, Lido has been one of the earliest supporters of what Rated is about and what Rated is working on. I think we got our first grant from Lido. We've since been on a couple grants rounds, building out infrastructure that Lido gets to benefit from. I think we're powering a few internal tools and a few external dashboards, including, I think more recently was the Vanom dashboard that the node operator management team published. And we also recently became a member of the Oracle operator group. And we're hoping to add this sort of independent third-party data energy to the mix. We've been so since the last 10 days, I think, and so far so good. We're very much looking forward to continuing to work with Lido and adding value to the DAO. So in a nutshell, sorry, my arrows aren't working, so I have to use this very fiddly Apple mouse. So in a nutshell, I know that a lot of you are probably aware of the Network Explorer and the whole interface. What we're here to do is to kind of make it all easy, add context, and really kind of like through open source methodologies, great documentation, and hopefully an ever improving user interface, which I can give you like a really quick review of. We can just help surface all the great things that we're doing as an industry in this infrastructure space in particular. So we are tracking a bunch of different data fields that relate to validator performance. We're contextualizing the penetration of pools, the different client diversities. Now, if you specifically like click on Lido, you can see that we're tracking basically Lido's footprint on Ethereum. It's deterministic performance in terms of spec, jobs to be done, if you will. We have an extensive section in our documentation that you can go and see how we go about calculating this effectiveness rating. And then you have a bunch of different operators. This is you guys watching this call that make up Lido, and a bunch of different statistics that relate to you. So specifically, like if you click through here, you can get the breakdown of your operation as it relates to Lido. But more recently, we added sort of operator tags, right? And then you can, if we have through open source repositories or otherwise map more of your operation on Ethereum, you'll just see it under a profile that you have over here. You can access it from the sidebar, and then also like see which pools you might be part of, and benchmark your performance against other folks that you're working alongside, and so on. We've also released a trending screen, which I have found actually a pretty interesting little tool to recognize who might not be doing so great, who might be challenged on any given day, which can be a nice sanity check layer or remediary factor. And we're going to be looking to add a lot more features to this one. We're releasing this network overview screen this week, where we're going to be kind of tracking the very, very high level statistics relating to the network, like reference rates, APRs, overall effectiveness, missed blocks network wide, and then withdrawal times, activation times, and all that in this ever changing landscape. We also are tracking MEV relays in terms of a bunch of different statistics, which we also look to enrich very, very soon, I think sometime in Q1. And then you'll see all these side screens come alive very, very soon. And I'd like to take a little bit of time to talk to you about kind of what we found, the value that we can add to different node operators through the work that we're doing and the products that we are putting together. I know we've been in conversations with a bunch of you already, and basically the work that we're doing in Q1 is all about sort of taking all those learnings from the last 9 months of it's more like 6 actually, of having an API that's open, permissionless, anybody can use, and so on, to actually really drive a lot more value back to users. And what we're going to be kind of enabling is a separation, thematic separation of the different endpoints in terms of a rewards API that will address all the needs a node operator might have in terms of accounting for rewards, to a very granular breakdown of penalties down to kind of the source of those penalties, and all the way up to kind of what missed rewards might mean, right? In different contextualizations in different methodologies of missed rewards, to MEV facilitated to aggregations that are arbitrarily flexible in terms of, a single validator index or a collection of validator indices. A performance API then that takes all care of all the things in terms of your performance monitoring and benchmarking needs, and a metadata API that covers everything that is network backdrop, client diversity, time active unmated, and anything that could be considered attributes of a validator operator. The goal here is to give you almost like a data team that you don't have to worry about. So we're constantly in front of any changes in the spec in Ethereum. We're developing features. We're improving on all fronts continuously, and so we want to enable people to think about what matters most to them, and this is driving value to your users. So a little bit about the things that we enabled recently. We introduced tags that I showed you before on the Explorer. We enabled node operator screens specifically for each operator that we've been able to put a profile together for. Relays training network overview screens, granular penalties and rewards, and missed rewards. And in Q1, we're going to be releasing a bunch of withdrawals features that will translate across all the views in the Network Explorer and the API. So materialized all the way up to the network level, down to the pool level, and then all the way down to a deposit address level, or even the validator index level. We're making forays in terms of making the Explorer and the API more real time, particularly in the performance contingent, but also enabling a block tape so that you're able to access kind of a live view of the blocks that are being produced by each frame of reference, and what sort of the metadata around that block might be. We're also productizing the API, and we're going to be releasing API documentation on how to make the most out of the data that we enable through our API. And then you're going to be able to also do things like pre-materialized views, create arbitrary aggregations of validator indices in private mode, so you can benchmark and do all kinds of interesting things there. And then we're also, one of the things that I'm really excited about is productizing a probe that we're doing in terms of the networking layer of Ethereum, and getting basically performance features and data about the network latency and so on. So really, really excited to be getting closer to letting that out in the world. So as part of the work that we're doing, we're going to be also enabling what we've kind of envisioned as the rated admin view, a console effectively, that from which you'll be able to manage all kinds of accesses regarding to the suite of products that we have going. One other thing that we're working on as a derivative of the API is a rated widget, which folks will be able to embed and then reference data about their operation that come from us. And then we're also working on a rated oracle, which is our vision for bringing all the data that are not core, or all what could be considered at a very reductionist view metadata about validators that are not necessarily kind of like the very granular rewards data or things that are very easy to reference, in bringing that to the Ethereum execution layer so that we can enable different types of products that are not easy to put together. So we have an outline doc, and we have a V0 deployment on Girly that you can play with. These tiles are linked with their equivalent hyperlinks, so you'll all be able to access them after this call. And before I sort of wrap up and we move towards Q&A, what I wanted to kind of reiterate is what we're here to do is we really want to promote transparency and good standards around the infrastructure layer of Ethereum and hopefully the whole of crypto Web3 industry, because we think that this is really a cornerstone in terms of unlocking new products, in terms of unlocking trust, and in terms of unlocking like a lot more great things that we can push this industry towards. So this is us. Come say hi. We'd love to hear from you. If you have product feedback, if you have features that you'd like to see, or if you'd like to integrate with our API, we're here, and we'd love to hear from you. You can find us under Rated W3B and at Rated.network, and I've left everybody kind of like a nice compendium of resources that you can sort of navigate around and then learn more about all the things that we're working on and how they might be of use to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Elias. Definitely send us the presentation and we'll include it in the description. Feel free to also throw it in the live chat right now. You've already got some questions. So Jack in the YouTube chat is asking, hey, Elias, do you see a path where this data could end up used for Lido on-chain, or better to have multiple parties run full calculations off-chain and then use the Oracle for Lido to bring results on-chain?
It's an interesting question. We have come across this quite a bit, and we're always thinking, what are the ways in which we can make the things that we're working on more robust? So I do think that there is a future where some of this data go through a process like the one you described, and there's in fact like a lot of data that relates to the operation of the infrastructure layer that are increasingly off-chain, right? So, for example, data APIs from MEV relays, right? These are off-chain agents, and then for a long time to come, depending on your definition of long, really, but it's at least multiple quarters. This data that are actually pretty critical in the way Lido might operate, or other protocols or applications might operate, are not necessarily, there's no source of truth for that data. There's no reference, and then if something happens to that API, if something changes after the fact or after an event happened, you don't really have a way to reference a source of truth there. So I foresee that, you know, as kind of the infrastructure layer becomes increasingly more valuable and grows, there will be more off-chain data like that have like a great effect and can be of great benefit. On the flip side, that would benefit from like a robust source of truth layer, right? So these are things that we're sort of ideating about and thinking about, and we're always happy to talk to other folks about as well. So if you wanna chat more about it, like please feel free to reach out. We're always happy to chat.
Awesome. I see that Jack also has a request. He wants to know more about what Noob Cybot has been up to on Ethereum. So if you can please add a slashing endpoint to get only slashing history for a certain period. None of that like useful validator stuff. He just wants to know about who got slashed.
We will. I can commit to that. But you also get all the Mortal Kombat references.
Absolutely.
They go hand in hand.
If I can subscribe to something that actually says like finish him every time somebody gets slashed, that'd be great. Also a question from Lawrence for the trending view. How do you determine the effectiveness of validators? What kind of metrics are you looking at?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we are describing all of it in our documentation. If I may, real quick, just click on the methodology, and then you'll see like we have a bunch of resources here, and then we're talking about we're describing in quite a bit of detail how we put it together. But I've been looking for like a cogent, easy way to explain what the effectiveness rating is about. And I came upon it recently, and it goes something like the effectiveness rating is basically your opportunity cost in terms of your deterministic rewards, right? So you have a bunch of jobs to do, and as a validator, and then the effectiveness, you can think of the effectiveness rating basically as an aggregation of all of these jobs that you have done. So if you've got like a 95% score, it really means that you did 95% of the jobs that you were expected to do in terms of the protocol, right? And then you didn't do 5% of the jobs that you did. And then you can think of it as kind of like a reverse opportunity cost in terms of your deterministic rewards accounting. And in fact, we've done a little bit of work on that recently, and we found that the two approaches, so the effectiveness rating is building bottom up, and then the other approach is basically top down. What did you miss? And then invert that one minus. We found that the two are correlated to the tune of like 98% with a crazy R squared and so on. So I hope that answers your question. But you know, we're always looking for ways to improve that. And we also recently enabled a forum where we hope that it can be. We've been having a bunch of these conversations in our Discord with people. We don't want to kind of come from a place of high authority, and we're always looking to improve. So, you know, Discord is a great venue to kind of like raise these types of questions. And then when there's something that needs to have a more permanent record in terms of what the rationale was behind a methodology change or new methodology introduction and so on, we hope that the forum can serve as a home for these types of things.
Awesome. Eugene, I see you also have a question in Zoom. Do you want to ask it live?
I'll do it. Thank you for presentation. Current features very impressive, and really curious. Will it be possible to prove that validator participated in some test net on a mainnet, or it will be separated?
So that's also something that we're thinking about very intently recently, and we are trying to find a way. The way I'm approaching this problem is that like I don't want to put something together that is like we have this sort of thing for that person and this other thing for that person. Like I'd like to find what the most common denominator is to do such a thing that translates across the majority of operators. So far, this is like a work in progress, right? So far, it turns out that there's like the variety of setups, distribution methods, deposit methods, deployment methods, and so on, is actually quite large. So we haven't been able to yet put together like a draft product spec, if you will, that satisfies everybody. So, you know, you think on the one hand, okay, so maybe you can sign a message from your deposit address and then signal that way, like provide a cryptographic proof that like you own or you operate all of these keys. Okay, well, but like there's a bunch of people that deploy through deposit addresses that get mixed through like batch contracts. Okay, wow, like so maybe the deposit address isn't the thing. And then like then you go to like the withdrawal credentials and you get the same issue. And so then you're like, okay, well, maybe you should sign with your operation keys. But people are like, the hell we will. Like this is like, you know, prime material. So we're not going to risk like moving that material, doing anything with that material. So there isn't like a million ways to skin this cat, but there are like thousands, it looks like. So I hope that we will get there. We are like, I've committed to like figuring this out. But to answer your question, Eugene, we don't have, yes, it's very likely that you'll see these types of features on Rated, hopefully this year. But exactly how and what form these will have, it's a work in progress. So if you know, if any of you want to help us understand your setups more and your specific sort of objective functions, really, please feel free to reach out. I'm also like at Eliasimos on Twitter. I'm pretty easy to find there. So my DMs are open. Would love to hear from you. Great question, Eugene. Thanks for asking it.
Thanks, Elias. I think that question itself is actually a pretty great segue into the last segment for today. Jorge from Nethermind is going to present the summary results and key takeaways from the Nethermind X Lido research project that's focusing on things like how can we get verifiable credentials and attestations with regards to off-chain data on-chain. What are the different ways to do this? How can we identify operators as entities, not necessarily like who they are, but they're not somebody else. And then talk a little bit about the phase 2 proposal with regards to how Nethermind can help Lido design a Sybil resistant system to reallocate stake across validators in the future. And with that, Jorge, take it away.
Thank you so much. Can everyone see my screen, first of all?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. So thank you, Elias, for a great presentation. And yeah, as Izzy said, like all of these topics you mentioned on how to make operator data available, and even there was a question about on-chain reputation, they're all very interesting to us. So we'll make sure to have a close look at what you guys are building at Rated. Hello, everyone. So I am Jorge from Nethermind, as Izzy said. We are a team of builders and researchers who have been working on the Ethereum ecosystem for, well, a few years now. And you may have also heard from us due to the Nethermind Ethereum client. It is an absolute honor for us to be part of this Lido community call. Today, we would like to take the opportunity to tell you about our research performed for the Lido DAO. And the goal of this research is to construct a mechanism that allows Lido to onboard new operators, both big and small, in a permissionless, automated, and robust way, in as much as this is possible, while also preserving Lido's capital efficiency, which is one of its excellent features. Now, this is a very hard problem, and I think it's essentially something open problem in the ecosystem right now. And the main reason for this is that we want to avoid having the protocol attacked by Sybils. And with this, we mean multiple identities that are being, in fact, controlled by the same person or organization. And whereas normal approaches to the problem of having Sybil resistance use some variant of proof of work or even proof of stake, We want to avoid going in this direction as much as we can because we would have to make some compromises in the capital efficiency of the protocol. So with that introduction, let us talk about how to build a permissionless, or how to go towards a permissionless set of operators. So as we said, this is a complex problem. We have decided to split it into, there's been a necessity to split it into several phases. We have completed phase 1 of our research with Lido, which was a systematization of knowledge for decentralized identities and verifiable credentials. I'll be sharing a QR link in the next slide, so you guys can check the final deliverable and what we did. And we currently have conversations going on in the Lido research forum for phase 2, which will undergo, or which will entail the design of a civil and white labeling resistant mechanism. So phase 1, as we said, here's a QR for the deliverable. I think we can also have the link to the deliverable in chat. If one of my colleagues can help me out with that, that would be much appreciated. Okay, so how does this come into the picture? Like, why are we interested in decentralized identities and verifiable credentials? Well, for the purpose of managing operators and any associated data that can be used to distinguish them in a permissionless way, we want to be able to both distribute and authenticate credentials. And so we come back to this central topic of credentials, and like, well, they are part of everyday life as well. You can think of like checking a book out of a library or getting into a bar. Normally those entail showing some kind of credential. You will see these concepts show up whenever we talk about credentials in any shape or form. You're going to have an issuer who issues the credentials. You're going to have claims, which are statements that about the owner of the credentials. And you're going to have a proof, which is typically an issuer's signature or some kind of like fault-proof mechanism on a set of claims. And so using verifiable credentials, users can prove to a verifier that a set of claims about them is true. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that when we're talking about verifiable credentials, we're talking about a fully decentralized protocol. We also have like centralized or hybrid approaches. And in fact, to kind of like motivate the discussion, let us go in detail over an example of how a centralized system of verifiable credentials could work. Okay, so you're going to need a centralized issuer that is going to be in charge of creating credentials and like authenticating them as well. Now, let us go with an example in which we have an example that involves pets, and we have the totally legit and non-made up International Pet Association represented by this building, henceforth the issuer or IPA. And let's say that all the pets in the world trust this issuer, so that this issuer holds their identity data and it holds their credentials, right? Okay, now the situation here is that our cat friend here on the left has recently moved to a neighborhood that is mostly made out of dog owners. And so he's looking to hire a dog bodyguard. So after posting on the internet, he receives a reply from an animal here on the right, claiming to be a dog. So you can see the contents of their communication here. But mistrustful as cats are, he asks the dog to prove his dogness to him. So prove that you're a dog. So the dog is going to get in touch with the issuer, who sends him a verifiable credential that is going to be signed by the issuer, claiming that the online identity that got in touch with the cat initially indeed corresponds to a dog. So after taking this signed document and showing it to the cat, the claim has been proven and trust has been established. And this is our mock example. Okay, but there's a few problems with this apart from the IPA not being a real thing. There's a problem in general with centralized identities, and it is that well, you have a central point of failure, and the issuer is needed to make any changes whatsoever to your identity. It needs to know what claims are made, and so you're trusting this centralized issuer with your privacy, and you're trusting him with the functionality of your identity system. Think about it in the sense of this rhetorical question. Can you issue your own passport? If you were to lose your passport, can you issue it a few hours before the flight? Of course you can't. And this is an issue when it comes to having sovereignty over your credentials and your identity. we want to move towards, inspired in the ethos of Ethereum, we want to move towards a more decentralized version. And it's going to be a necessity if we want to build a permissionless protocol as well. So ask these questions again in the context of Ethereum. Can you issue your own Ethereum account? Or can you prove claims about your Ethereum account? The answers to these are yes, of course. Anything that happens on chain can be verified by a third party regarding your account. And you have control over your public and private keys. So, sorry, 1 second. We come into the subject of decentralized identities and decentralized identifiers here. In order to be able to make statements about, or the verifiable credentials are making statements about your identity, but you want to have that identity and that information be available somewhere that doesn't require the intervention of a centralized issuer. So enter decentralized identities and decentralized identifiers. Decentralized identifiers in particular, which you can see down here, are a sort of pointer to the location of, well, first of all, whichever protocol you're using to store your identity. And in this example, you can have stuff like Ethereum or given implementations of identity protocols on the Ethereum blockchain. And you're also going to have a pointer towards where your identity data is stored. And whoever has this DID is able to find the location of your identity and is going to be able to assert that a given verifiable credential or verifiable claim that was made about your identity is correspondent to your identity indeed. Here we have it again. They are unique identifiers, which enable identities to generate their own decentralized identities and to prove control over them. So what we were saying before. Now, you can have decentralized identities, of course, but then this begs the question of how are you going to populate these identities with information? And how are you going to do it in what sources of data can be used to construct these decentralized identities in a way that is meaningful and useful? You can have some examples such as Web3 data, NFTs, SBTs, Ethereum accounts. And a lot of identity approaches have been based heavily on these. But there's a lot of useful data that is also off-chain. You can think of data coming from Web2 services, stuff like reputation scores on Stack Overflow or Reddit, which would normally show expertise on a certain topic, or stars on GitHub. You can also think about real-world credentials if you want to like really tie this your identity to something that's going on in the real world, government or institutional IDs, or even biometrics, which can be a controversial direction, but is also something that that is happening in the space right now, or that people are building solutions related to. And so the rationale as to looking at these sources of data is that if we build identities with data that is valuable enough, we may be able to increase Sybil resistance. And this rationale also leads us to a challenge. So how do we pull the data in a verifiable way so that the system is not likely to be exploited? And all of these kind of like tangential concepts and questions that we have been discussing in this talk have been important cornerstones of our research. Here we have an example of how we can answer the previous question in the affirmative by looking at how to transfer data from Web 2 to Web 3. There's a nice protocol we found that is called DECO. It allows you to get data that is accessible by TLS, which is, well, essentially the most widely used protocol for protecting internet communications, in a way that is privacy preserving and that doesn't require any TLS modifications, that is any server-side modifications, in order to extract the data in this way. This is just an example of what we found, although it's one of the most notable ones. So let us, I will skip some of the details in the interest of time, and I will mention this again in the conclusions. We not only found some ways to pull this data in a verifiable way, we also found some protocols that exist or are being built nowadays, which can be used as building blocks for solutions that involve decentralized identity. Among these, we would like to highlight Polygon ID. We would like to highlight Sysmo as a protocol for zero-knowledge attestations. We would like to highlight EBSI as a nice kind of like hybrid approach as to how to interconnect real-world credentials coming from government level data to the blockchain, to Web3. And we also highlight Interep as a protocol that provides this anti-civil service, allowing people to export their reputation across platforms. So we're just mentioning some of the building blocks here, and we would invite people who are interested into digging deeper to look at the deliverable that we shared a few minutes ago. So what did we check in the construction of this deliverable? Well, we scoured the literature and we went over 100 research papers, agreeing upon roughly 70 of them, which held the stuff that was interesting to the problem at hand. We looked at classical papers all the way from the 90s to the modern approachers. We paid special attention to solutions that focused on privacy. This with regards to verifiable credential schemes. Also with regards to decentralized identities, how to issue statements about them efficiently, how to issue credentials in a decentralized manner. And we also kept an eye out on how to prevent civils at this identity level, although results were somewhat lacking, and we realized that we needed to tackle this problem more carefully on a second stage of research. And getting data to Web3, as we mentioned before, there's DECO, Interep, an Oracle approach, and other protocols we looked at, such as Candid and TLS Notary, among others. So what did we find? What are the takeaways from all the research we made? And there's a nice blog post, or there's a nice post about this in the research forum. But the takeaways for you guys, well, we found some positives. There are interesting projects that are trying to make verifiable credentials a part of Ethereum. These, as we said before, are building blocks that can massively help us in implementing a final solution that requires to manage identity. And there are viable approaches of getting Web2 data uploaded to Web3 on a safe, private, verifiable way. And we also find some negatives and some points that will need to be addressed moving forward. Many solutions require a centralized issuer. There are problems with standards for DIDs, and there are not many projects that are trying to fight civils. With standards for DIDs, we mean essentially like a consensus on how things are being built. This moves into phase 2, civil and white label resistance mechanism design. So in the interest of time, let me mention that here we're looking at the problem of civils, which we already touched upon, and also white labels. So a party that may not want to run a validator on its own, but secretly cede that task to a third party, which would be called a white label operator. We want to avoid these things because they can lead to single points of failure and giving a single party much more power for a malicious act. So among the ideas that we are currently studying, and this is like this is already still in a proposal stage that you can look at the research forum. But some of the ideas we have at the moment, we want to look into our arbiter protocols, such as prediction markets, decentralized oracles, or token creator registries, in order to give people and the community in general an ability to fight against civils, and be able to act as a kind of whistleblower mechanism, or just in general be able to get these statements about whether a given party is civil or not, put them up on one of these arbiter protocols, and have the truth come to the surface by the right economic incentives. So this is one of the ideas we're playing with, and there's many, many more that we would invite you guys to look at in the Lido research forum as part of the proposal that we're making to Lido. So if one of my colleagues can drop that link in the chat, that would be great as well. And so that concludes our talk. We are Nethermind. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions or comments, we're more than happy to take those.
Thanks a lot, Jorge. It looks like we've already got some questions on YouTube. First question is from Jack. So these decentralized identity approaches like EBSI, is the data still stored somewhere? If they use a service provider, do they store it?
So for EBSI, yeah, let me remember how this goes. So in the case of EBSI, which is mostly focusing on how you can use an already existing trust infrastructure, which is given in this case by government IDs for the European Union, which can be leveraged as a source of trust. And so the idea is how can you make these identities that are coming from a centralized trust provider, how can they be moved to Web3 in order for, or kind of like exported to Web3 in a way that people can interact with their Web3 identities and you can be sure that you are dealing with a real person. So with regards to whether the data is being stored somewhere, or like where is the data being stored, in the case of EBSI, this project focused specifically on this identity data corresponding to your like real world self, so to speak, and that is in servers that correspond to or that are in control of a centralized entity, which in this case would be government entities. As for information or like other information that you want to add to your identity, there's multiple ways you can go about this. You can use any of the decentralized identity protocols that we touched upon. And you could find a way, for example, to link these two identities by using a verifiable claim or a verifiable credential that points to your Web3 identity. So all this to say, it depends on the the short story of the answer. It depends on the application in question. But one thing you can do, and I think it's a common approach, is you can have the data stored on a decentralized place. So I don't know, something like IPFS or so, and just have pointers to that, and have the pointers be authenticated by a verifiable claim.
Thanks. And there's a follow-up to the question. So how can this work when across different like geographies or countries, Lido users obviously might be distributed across the globe. And so verifying this information can be challenging or difficult or like even not possible in certain places versus others.
This is absolutely correct. And it's a good question. We have found, for example, that across, if we're talking about centralized data coming from governments, say, and if we want to leverage these credentials, we have seen that, for example, different governments would have different levels of security or like different standards that they enforce. For example, this project by EBSI really streamlines the process of getting this information on-chain onto Web3. And there's also the Candid protocol that suggests a way to use IDs for like US citizens, so like social security numbers, in a private way to verify your identity. Now, these are all, we're not necessarily saying that we're going to go in this direction, but we're exploring what is out there and whether using this kind of data is viable across the board. And indeed, it seems that there are some challenges as to, for example, for other countries than the ones we mentioned, it may be challenging to pull off an approach like this one. And this leads us to look even harder into pulling data from Web 2 to Web 3, for example, or like using Web 3 data in a way that is meaningful to towards the construction of your identity when these approaches are not available.
I think the other kind of like corollary to this is that what we're trying to do right now is identify what data can be used, how can it be used, and how can its veracity be like verified on chain. Well, first of all, port it on chain and then make sure that the claim is verifiable in perpetuity or for however long you need it. But the other important thing is that you're like stacking reputation on top of each other, right? So it's not a binary thing, like, is this user verified or identified or not? It's more like, how many different points of information can different entities, users, or organizations provide that in aggregate provide like the amount of comfort, if you want to put it that way, or trust or security that allow us to establish that like this person or entity is in a different zone of trust compared to another person or entity that's like in a much lower zone of trust. And so you can build reputation by effectively proving that like you're not somebody else, which is not necessarily the same thing as proving specifically who you are. And then if you mesh all of these different things together, you should be allowed to more or less like achieve different more or less achieve the same levels of trust, like get into the same zone of trust as somebody else by providing different pieces of information. So maybe it's providing more pieces of smaller pieces of information, or maybe it's providing like one big piece of information. And then seeing the way that trust can be kind of like categorized by looking at things in aggregate.
That's exactly right. So it can very well be that the final solution to this problem ends up looking like several layers of nets that are stacked up on top of each other, and being able to penetrate the entire solution from end to end may be very complicated, as in like one shores up the weaknesses of the other. Stuart has a question, I think.
Yeah, Stu?
Yeah, I think just as Izzy mentioned, this can be one of the kind of like prongs of a multifaceted system. And as you said, reputation on its own is very gameable. In particular, it is susceptible to long-range attacks in which a user plays nice for a sufficiently long period of time. They stack up reputation, and then they use it in malicious ways. So anything that can tell us all the sources of information that we can get that would tell us, first of all, it is unlikely that this person is the same as this other identity or any of the other identities that are already part of the network. And also something that tells us this person's identity has something to lose or has something at stake. Like in terms of their own kind of like identity or reputation, if something malicious were to happen, all of these are data points that we are happy to leverage. And I think something like proof of humanity is one of those, to be sure. Yeah. Thank you so much, Stuart. And yeah, you definitely have a good grasp on the problem, I think. Because as you said, like just reputation on its own is susceptible to stuff like long-range attacks, and stuff like TCRs or even like decentralized courts are also susceptible to economic attacks of some kind. So like a sufficiently motivated attacker can, with enough funds, can wreak havoc on the system. So you really want to stack these solutions in order to make one cover the weaknesses of the other. And in the end, you want to make sure like you go through the security of the whole system end to end, and have ways of settling any kinds of disputes that may arise, and so on and so forth. It's a complex system with many moving pieces, and we're making sure we take our time and we look into every nook and cranny to get it right. That's fantastic. Looking forward to connecting, Stuart.
All right, actually making like progress on the call. That's awesome. There's a follow-up question from Jack, going back to the earlier discussion around importing VCs from verifiable credentials from Web 2 or Web 3 data. So how much confidence can we get that we can like measurably prevent possible SIBILs if we're only using Web 2 or Web 3 data, given how like potentially easy it is to duplicate or automate duplication or manufacturing of some of these types of like accounts? You know, like you can generate GitHub accounts pretty easily, right? Or you can even generate GitHub accounts that have like perfunctory commits that don't really do anything.
That is right. I just want to say I love the energy and the curiosity of the community here, because these are excellent questions, and we have been looking at them for a while. So it's very nice to see people interested in the same kinds of problems. So yeah, that is correct. For example, if it is about like manufacturing a GitHub account with just a bunch of stars or a bunch of reputation, you could probably find a way to script this, to do it en masse, or to game the system. I think there are two lines of attack, or like two of defense against this problem. One would be there are some protocols that, or some algorithms that not only look at these data points in isolation, but they also look at the interrelations between them. So there's I would say a foundational paper from the 90s, I think, from a protocol that is called Eigentrust, which what it does is it looks at the reputation of individual users, but it also looks at who is connected to whom. And it uses this to kind of like, apart from this individual reputation, to kind of like construct a more global reputation that can tell you whether something fishy is going on. Like, is this person only talking or relating to people that look like civils? Then it leverages this information to kind of like lower the score of this person, or to like raise an alarm as to what could be going on. Still, there are ways around this. It makes it a lot more complicated to farm civils if you're using these sorts of heuristics, but it makes it a lot more complicated. But for the remaining gaps, it is advisable to look at other kinds of, as we said, stacking other kinds of solutions. So we can look at on-chain reputation for node operators, for example. And like if someone is trying to break into this game and sort of like become a node operator on its own, we can look at stuff like testnet performance, that was mentioned before. This has been one of the ideas we have been playing with. We can look at other sources of data. And in general, the MO, as you can probably tell from this conversation, is if we strengthen a system as much as we can so that we make it really painful for someone to game it, and then we also reinforce it with different kinds of systems to build like a more holistic solution. But yeah, so the short version of the answer would be we have algorithms or heuristics that can look at this data points in conjunction and raise alarms in case someone is doing something like farming. And if they are super clever about it, then we would like to fall back on other mechanisms.
Awesome. And last question that I see from the YouTube chat: how does your research on verifiable credentials and identity and reputation fit in with the work being done by other teams on distributed validator technology?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. Thank you so much. We haven't had the time to touch upon distributed validator technology, but that is indeed one of the fallback mechanisms, or like one of the mechanisms that helps us build like a more robust solution that you're talking about, that we're talking about here. Because with DVT, so if perhaps there are people in the call that are not as familiar with it, kind of like just to, in a nutshell, you take a validator, and instead of having a single node operator run it, you create a mini pool, a mini consensus algorithm, or a mini consensus protocol made out of like 4 different people, or more depending on the application. And you have these 4 people come to a consensus 3 out of 4 every time a block needs to be proposed, every time someone needs to validate. The DVT is definitely like a blessing for us in the sense that, whereas before a single civil or malicious party could make it so that if they came to control a validator, they were in control of 32 ETH, and they had the potential to get it slashed maliciously and just participate of an attack, like say doing something silly to get slashed while at the same time shorting STETH or these kinds of attack vectors. Now when you have DVT, you have to involve coordination, and you make it a lot more complicated for a single identity to overwrite the vote of the others, which hopefully will be honest operators. You can also make it so that even if a single party has access to a bunch of civils, you can distribute them across a bunch of DVT pools. And as long as you don't have like 2 civils at the same time in the same DVT pool, you're essentially nullifying their effect over the network. So it gives you a lot of wiggle room as to how many malicious entities you can tolerate before you start seeing any real damage. And we think it's an amazing technology that is definitely going to be part of our recommendations, and we're going to try to integrate it with what we're doing, and also have our identity mechanisms work in or construct these DBT pools if the solution ends up being leveraged by, if this technology ends up being leveraged by Lido, the DBT technology, then have our identity mechanism construct the DBT pools in a way that is cognizant of these, avoiding these kinds of correlations.
Oh, thanks a lot, Jorge. I think there was just one last question again from Jack. In terms of like people trying to Sybil the Sybil mechanism. So basically, if you get like spammed or even denial of service potentially, right, where the verification mechanism gets inundated by requests or by like duplicated information, how can you have a good enough feeling, let's say, that it can put up with this much information? Like, does the protocol somehow get limited by the bandwidth that the verification mechanism needs to be able to parse all of these different applications? And then two, how can you, like, how can you feel that perhaps you have the capacity or even a mechanism that can do this, given the scale at which somebody can launch an attack? I think just like really quickly off the top of my head, the way that you would meter this is by adding some sort of cost, whether that's like a real cost or an opportunity cost to waging this attack. So one way around that is like there's an application fee. The application fee can be like returned if there is a good enough reputation or identity amassed after the application process. But then the application fee would be kept, for example, if that identity at some point gets disputed. Another way to do it is by like requiring collateral, at least until you reach certain zones of trust, whereby that collateral can be clawed back. And then there's also other things that you can do, especially for operators that haven't reached trusted zones, or at least for operators that maintain, like, let's say, full anonymity, but are only providing reputation in other ways, like around performance, is by delaying rewards. And in that sense, if you delay rewards, so like a node operator would receive their rewards over 6 months as opposed to like immediately the next day, there's always like a forward-looking opportunity cost that can be clawed back by the protocol if it turns out that any of these operators are malicious. And that's only like one layer of defense mechanism, right? You can try to come up with other layers of defense mechanisms, like whistleblowing protocols, prediction markets, perhaps, where like people bet on their reputation in order to gain more rewards. And you could do that like via a restaking mechanism, and then dispute resolution mechanisms on top of those in order to figure out like who is actually telling the truth and who's blowing the whistle successfully and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So for stuff like prediction markets, for example, we can do what Izzy said and have to some sort of bond or economic incentive that has to be posted by whoever is making this challenge. And so kind of like as a final point, this idea of like using economic incentives and maybe small force of bonding, this is kind of our ace in the hole, right? We want to this can be a part of the solution. We just want to be make sure that we're not overusing it so that like we can make the capital efficiency of the final solution as large as possible. But for situations where like we definitely just don't have enough data points to establish trust, stuff like a small bond can be looked into, and as parties interact with the protocol and become more trusted, kind of like as a bridge between those 2 points, or as a transition. Stuart has his hand up. Mm-hmm. Wow. Great.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Yeah, we're gonna wrap it up with that because we're almost nearing 2 hours. I also heard that like Zoom questions weren't being heard on the call, unfortunately. So we'll try to incorporate those into the recording. If not, we'll try to offer a transcript together with the recording. So thanks everybody for joining. Awesome interaction both from the call and from the chat. I hope that the future calls are like this. And let's continue the discussion on the forums and in our Discord. Thanks a lot, and see you in next month's call. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.